Spiritual awakening is not a mystical event reserved for a chosen few. It is a profound journey of self-discovery that is available to every human being who feels the inner calling to something greater. This call does not come as a flash of light or a voice from the heavens. It comes as a deep restlessness, a persistent questioning that begins to echo in the innermost being. There is a fundamental truth that few understand. Awakening does not happen in a single moment of enlightenment. It is a continuous journey, a process of deconstruction and reconstruction that completely transforms the way we perceive reality and our own existence. This journey does not begin when we are ready, but when it is necessary, often at the most unexpected and challenging moments in our lives. The first movement of awakening is always deep questioning. This is when we begin to realize that there is something beyond the surface of the reality we have constructed. Questions arise from the depths of my being. Who am I beyond the roles I play? What is the true meaning of my existence? Why do I feel like there is something bigger than I can see and touch? This initial questioning is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a calling from the soul itself. It is as if a different frequency begins to vibrate within us, revealing that there is much more to existence than what our physical senses can capture. This initial realization can be frightening as it begins to destabilize the structures we thought were solid in our lives. Spiritual awakening is not a path for the weak. It requires tremendous courage to question everything we have always believed to be true. We need to be willing to look beyond appearances, beyond social conditioning, beyond the limiting beliefs we carry throughout our lives. It is a process of peeling back the layers of illusion, one by one, until we find the true core of our being. When we begin this journey, the first thing we need to understand is that there is no turning back. Once we begin to see through the veil of illusion, we can no longer pretend it doesn't exist. It's like waking up from a dream. No matter how hard we try, we can't return to our previous state of unconsciousness. Spiritual awakening is irreversible. The journey of awakening unfolds at increasingly deeper levels of understanding and transformation. The first level is the awakening of individual consciousness. This is when we begin to realize that we are not just our thoughts, emotions, or the role we play in society. There is something deeper, more essential in our nature. This first level of awakening is accompanied by a feeling of expanding consciousness. It's as if we can suddenly see the world through a completely new lens. Colors seem more vivid, sounds clearer, experiences more intense. But along with this expansion also comes a deep discomfort, the discomfort of no longer being able to fit into the old structures that once defined us. The process of spiritual awakening brings with it a series of challenges that few are prepared to face. The first and most significant is the confrontation with our own shadow, those parts of ourselves that we prefer to keep hidden, denied, repressed. On the path of awakening, nothing can remain in the shadows. Everything needs to come to the light of consciousness. This confrontation with the shadow is one of the most challenging aspects of the spiritual journey. It's when we are forced to look at our deepest fears, our most deep-seated insecurities, our most destructive behavior patterns. It is a painful but necessary process. For it is only through the recognition and integration of our shadow that we can achieve the totality of our being. Spiritual awakening also forces us to question all of our relationships with ourselves, with others, with the world around us. We begin to notice the dysfunctional patterns we've held for so long, the masks we wear to please others, the barriers we've built to protect ourselves from true intimacy. As we progress through the journey, we begin to experience moments of deep clarity and connection. These are moments when the separation between the self and the whole seems to dissolve, when we experience a feeling of unity with all existence. These moments are precious, but they should not be confused with the final destination of the journey. They are just glimpses of what is possible, invitations to continue deepening our exploration. The awakening process inevitably leads us to what mystics call the dark night of the soul, a period of profound disorientation and existential questioning. This is when all the structures that supported our reality begin to crumble. Our most fundamental beliefs are questioned, our most solid certainties dissolve. This stage of the journey is particularly challenging because we feel completely alone. It's like being lost in a dark forest, without a map, without a compass, without any reference point. Many give up at this point, desperately trying to hold on to the old structures that are falling apart. But those who can persist discover that this darkness has a profound purpose. The dark night of the soul is a process of death and rebirth. It is the death of the false self, of the ego that we have built over a lifetime. It is painful because the ego fights desperately to survive, to maintain its control over our reality. But it is only through this symbolic death that we can be reborn into a higher level of consciousness. During this period, we experience a deep feeling of emptiness. All the meanings we once gave to life seem to dissipate. Activities that used to bring us satisfaction lose their flavor. The relationships that once defined us seem empty of meaning. It's as if we are suspended in the void, with nothing solid to support us. But it is precisely in this void that we find our true nature. When all external structures crumble, when all supports are removed, what remains is our deepest essence, that which was always there, but was covered up by layers and layers of conditioning. The process of spiritual awakening also leads us to a deep reconnection with the body. In modern society, we have become extremely dissociated from our physical nature. We live mostly in our heads, treating the body like a machine that needs to be controlled and disciplined. Awakening brings us back to the wisdom of the body, to its innate intelligence. This reconnection with the body is fundamental because it is through it that we experience reality directly, not mediated by thought. The body is our first spiritual teacher. It teaches us about presence, about being in the present moment, about the interconnectedness of all things. As we move along the journey of awakening, we begin to develop a new relationship with time. The conditioned mind is always projected into the future or stuck in the past, but awakening brings us into the eternal present. We begin to realize that the only real moment is now, that past and future are mental constructs. This new perception of time brings a profound transformation in our way of living. We are no longer constantly chasing future goals or carrying the weight of past experiences. We learn to live each moment to its fullest, to find eternity in the present moment. Spiritual awakening also completely transforms our relationship with suffering. In ordinary consciousness, we run away from suffering, we try to avoid it at all costs. But on the path to awakening, we begin to understand that suffering has a profound purpose. It is the catalyst for transformation. We learn not to resist suffering, not to create a story of victimization around us. We begin to see that suffering is like a transformative fire. It burns away everything that is false in us, leaving only what is true and essential. One of the most profound transformations that occur on the path of awakening is the gradual dissolution of the ego. The ego is the psychological structure we build to give us a sense of separate identity. It is necessary for our survival and early development, but at a certain point it becomes a prison that prevents us from experiencing our true nature. The dissolution of the ego does not mean its complete destruction. It continues to exist as a useful tool for navigating the material world. What changes is our identification with him. We no longer see it as who we are, but as an instrument we can use when necessary. As this identification with the ego diminishes, we begin to experience a profound sense of freedom. We are no longer tied to the narratives we create about ourselves, no longer limited by the roles we play in society. We begin to experience our true nature, which is vast, limitless, free. Spiritual awakening also leads us to a new understanding of love. In ordinary consciousness, love is always conditional, always based on need and attachment. But as we awaken, we begin to experience a love that is unconditional, that does not depend on external circumstances or reciprocity. This love is not a feeling, it is a state of being. It is the profound recognition of our essential unity with all existence. When we experience this love, there is no longer any separation between the lover and the beloved. There is only love flowing freely, without obstacles, without conditions. The path of awakening also leads us to a new relationship with power. In ordinary consciousness, power means control over ourselves, over others, over life's circumstances. But in spiritual awakening, we discover a different kind of power, the power that comes from surrender, from deep acceptance of what is. This surrender is not passivity or resignation. It's a profound yes to life exactly as it is. It is the understanding that we do not need to constantly fight reality, that we can trust the natural flow of existence. One of the most transformative aspects of spiritual awakening is the change in our perception of death. In ordinary consciousness, death is seen as the absolute end, something to be feared and avoided. But as we awaken, we begin to see death as an integral part of life, as a natural and necessary aspect of existence. This new understanding of death frees us from the existential fear that permeates human consciousness. We begin to see that what we truly are cannot die, only the forms change, but the essence remains eternally present. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with our life purpose. In ordinary consciousness, we are always searching for an external purpose, something that gives meaning to our existence. But on the path to awakening, we discover that true purpose is not something we need to seek, it is something we already are. Our true nature is to be a unique expression of universal consciousness. Each of us is like a unique wave in the ocean of existence, individual in its expression, but never separate from the whole. Living in alignment with this truth is our true purpose. As we move along the path of awakening, we develop a new relationship with truth. We no longer settle for second-hand truths, inherited beliefs, or learned concepts. We seek a truth that can be directly experienced, that can be known in our own being. This search for truth leads us to question everything, our beliefs, our values, our worldview. We no longer accept anything just because we were told or because it's always been that way. We want to know the truth for ourselves, through our own direct experience. Spiritual awakening also leads us to a new understanding of the nature of reality. We begin to see that the material world we perceive with our senses is not the whole story, it is just the surface of something much vaster and deeper. Reality is much more mysterious and multidimensional than our rational mind can comprehend. We begin to realize that there are subtler levels of experience, deeper dimensions of reality that are beyond ordinary perception. One of the most profound transformations that occur on the path of awakening is the development of intuition. In ordinary consciousness, we rely mainly on rational thinking, logic, analysis. But as we awaken, we begin to develop a more direct form of knowing, a knowing that comes from the heart, not the head. This intuition is not opposed to reason, it transcends and includes it. It is a higher form of intelligence that can perceive the truth directly, without the need for analysis or logical deduction. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with creativity. In ordinary consciousness, we see creativity as something we do, a skill we need to develop or a technique we need to learn. But on the path to awakening, we discover that creativity is our essential nature. We are creative expressions of universal consciousness. Every moment of our life is an act of creation. We are constantly co-creating our reality through our consciousness, our choices, our actions. As we move along the path of awakening, we develop a new relationship with silence. In ordinary consciousness, silence is seen as an absence of sound, of movement, of activity. But in spiritual awakening, we discover that silence is full, alive, vibrant. This silence is not just external, it is an inner silence, a space of stillness where we can find our true nature. It is in silence that we can hear the subtle voice of our soul, that we can feel the presence of the divine in our own being. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with nature. We begin to see that we are not separate from nature, we are nature. Every tree, every flower, every animal is an expression of the same consciousness that we are. This reconnection with nature is not just conceptual, it is a visceral experience of our interdependence with the entire web of life. We begin to feel the rhythm of the seasons within us, the pulse of life in every living being, the eternal dance of creation manifesting itself in each moment. The path of awakening inevitably leads us to a deeper understanding of responsibility. Not responsibility as a burden or obligation, but as a natural response to understanding our true nature. When we realize that we are an integral part of the whole, our action in the world naturally becomes more conscious and compassionate. This responsibility extends beyond our own lives. We begin to see that every thought, every word, every action has an impact on the greater field of consciousness. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is interconnected in an infinite web of relationships. Awakening also brings a new understanding of forgiveness. In ordinary consciousness, forgiveness is seen as something we do for others, often as an act of virtue or moral superiority. But on the spiritual path, we discover that true forgiveness is an act of self-liberation. Forgiving means letting go of the weight of the hurts and resentments we carry, not because the actions that hurt us were justifiable, but because we understand that carrying this weight only harms ourselves. True forgiveness arises naturally from the deep understanding that we are all doing the best we can with the level of consciousness we have at the moment. One of the most subtle transformations that occurs on the path to awakening is the change in our relationship with desire. In ordinary consciousness, we are constantly driven by desires, desire for pleasure, for recognition, for security, for control. These desires keep us in a constant state of searching, always wanting something that isn't here now. But as we awaken, we begin to see the illusory nature of these desires. Not that they disappear completely, but our identification with them diminishes. We begin to experience a natural contentment that does not depend on the satisfaction of external desires. Spiritual awakening also profoundly transforms our relationship with knowledge. In ordinary consciousness, knowledge is something we accumulate, information, concepts, theories. The more we know, the more we feel secure and established. But on the path to awakening, we discover that true knowledge is not cumulative, it is transformative. Spiritual knowledge is not something we can possess or accumulate. It's more like a fire that transforms us, that burns away our illusions and leaves us lighter, more transparent to the truth. The more we know, the more we realize how much we don't know, and this humility becomes a door to deeper wisdom. One of the most significant hallmarks of spiritual awakening is the development of presence. In ordinary consciousness, we are constantly lost in thoughts about the past or worries about the future. Our energy is dispersed, fragmented, divided. But as we awaken, we develop the ability to be fully present in a current moment. This presence is not a state we achieve through effort, it is our essential nature. It's what remains when we stop resisting the present moment, when we allow life to be exactly as it is. In presence, we find a peace that does not depend on external circumstances. Awakening also brings a new understanding of service. In ordinary consciousness, serving others is often seen as a sacrifice, something we do out of duty or moral obligation. But on the spiritual path, we discover that true service arises naturally from recognizing our essential oneness with all life. When we truly understand that there is no other, that we are all expressions of the same consciousness, serving becomes as natural as breathing. It is not something we do out of duty or to gain spiritual merit, it is simply the natural expression of our true nature. One of the most profound transformations that occurs on the path of awakening is the change in our relationship with joy. In ordinary consciousness, we seek joy in external experiences, in achievements and achievements. But as we awaken, we discover a joy that is our essential nature. This joy does not depend on external circumstances, it is always present as the background of all experiences. Even in moments of sadness or difficulty, we can feel this underlying joy, this silent celebration of existence. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with personal power. In ordinary consciousness, power is often associated with domination, control, the ability to impose our will. But on the spiritual path, we discover a different kind of power, the power that comes from authenticity, from truth, from integrity. This power does not need to impose itself or dominate, it simply is. It is the power that comes from being fully aligned with our inner truth, from living in harmony with our essential nature. It is a power that does not diminish others but lifts them up, inspiring them to find their own inner power. One of the most subtle transformations that occurs on the path to awakening is the change in our relationship with vulnerability. In ordinary consciousness, vulnerability is seen as weakness, something to be avoided or overcome. We build walls around our hearts, trying to protect ourselves from pain and disappointment. But as we awaken, we discover that our true strength lies in our vulnerability. When we have the courage to open our hearts, to show ourselves as we really are, we tap into a strength that is much deeper than any protection we can build. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with mystery. In ordinary consciousness, we want explanations for everything. We want to control and understand every aspect of life. Mystery scares us, makes us feel insecure. But on the spiritual path, we learn to embrace mystery, to marvel at the incomprehensible. We begin to see that life is much more vast and mysterious than our minds can comprehend. Instead of trying to fit everything into our mental categories, we learn to dance with the unknown, to trust the mystery that constantly unfolds in our lives. Awakening also brings a new understanding of healing. In ordinary consciousness, we seek healing as a way to fix something that is broken, to return to a previous state of health or well-being. But on the spiritual path, we discover that true healing is a process of integration. It's not about eliminating parts of ourselves that we find undesirable, but about embracing all parts of our experience with compassion and understanding. True healing happens when we stop fighting what is and begin to accept the totality of our experience. One of the most profound transformations that occurs on the path of awakening is the change in our relationship with the sacred. In ordinary consciousness, the sacred is something separate from ordinary life, something we encounter only in special moments or specific places. But as we awaken, we begin to see the sacred in everything. Every moment becomes an opportunity to encounter the divine. Every breath, every heartbeat, every encounter with another human being becomes an expression of the sacred. There is no longer a division between the sacred and the profane. Everything is a manifestation of the same divine consciousness. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with the suffering of others. In ordinary consciousness, other people's suffering causes us discomfort. We want to distance ourselves from it or try to fix it quickly. But on the spiritual path, we develop the ability to be present with suffering without getting lost in it. This compassionate presence does not mean that we can eliminate the suffering of others, but that we can offer a space of understanding and acceptance where healing can happen naturally. It is a form of love that does not try to fix or change, but simply to be present with what is. One of the most subtle transformations that occurs on the path to awakening is the change in our relationship with death. In ordinary consciousness, death is seen as the opposite of life, something to be feared and avoided. But as we awaken, we begin to see death as an integral part of the life process. Every moment contains both birth and death. Each breath is both an inhalation and an exhalation. Each experience arises and disappears in the vast ocean of consciousness. When we understand this deeply, the fear of death begins to dissolve. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with time. In ordinary consciousness, we live trapped in a linear timeline, always running from the past to the future. But on the spiritual path, we discover a different dimension of time, the eternal present. This present is not a point between past and future, it is the very matrix of existence, where all time exists simultaneously. When we touch this dimension of the present, we experience a freedom that transcends all temporal limitations. One of the most profound transformations that occurs on the path of awakening is the change in our relationship with truth. In ordinary consciousness, truth is seen as something fixed, absolute, something we can possess or defend. But as we awaken, we begin to see truth as something alive, dynamic, always revealing itself in new ways. Truth is not something we can capture in words or concepts, it is something we live, that we experience directly. The more we open to the truth, the more it transforms us, taking us to ever deeper levels of understanding. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with purpose. In ordinary consciousness, we seek an external purpose, something that gives meaning to our lives. But on the spiritual path, we discover that our true purpose is simply to be who we really are. We don't need to create a purpose for our lives, we just need to remove the obstacles that prevent us from expressing our essential nature. When we live in alignment with our inner truth, our purpose naturally reveals itself in each moment. Spiritual awakening also profoundly transforms our relationship with the ego. In ordinary consciousness, we identify completely with the ego, believing that it is who we really are. The ego becomes the center of our existence, constantly seeking validation, security, and control. But on the spiritual path, we begin to see the ego for what it really is, a necessary structure for our existence in the material world, but not our true identity. This understanding of the ego is one of the most liberating transformations on the spiritual path. We begin to see that we don't need to fight the ego or try to destroy it, we just need to recognize its instrumental nature. The ego becomes a useful tool for navigating the world, but no longer the center of our identity. One of the most subtle transformations that occurs on the path to awakening is the change in our relationship with energy. In ordinary consciousness, we rarely notice the subtle energies that permeate our existence. But as we awaken, we develop an ever greater sensitivity to these subtler dimensions of reality. We begin to realize that everything is energy at different levels of manifestation. Our thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, all are different expressions of the same fundamental energy. This understanding leads us to a more conscious way of living, where we pay attention not only to what is visible and tangible, but also to the more subtle energetic qualities of each situation. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with the body. In ordinary consciousness, we see the body as a machine that needs to be controlled and kept working. But on the spiritual path, we discover that the body is a sacred temple, a refined instrument of perception and expression of consciousness. This new relationship with the body leads us to a more integrated way of living. We no longer separate the physical from the spiritual. We begin to see that every cell in our body is an expression of divine consciousness. The body becomes our partner on the spiritual path, a wise guide that helps us navigate the deep waters of transformation. One of the most profound transformations that occurs on the path of awakening is the change in our relationship with personal power. In ordinary consciousness, power is often associated with domination and control. But on the spiritual path, we discover a different kind of power, the power that comes from being in alignment with our true nature. This authentic power does not need to impose itself or dominate, it simply is. It is the power that comes from living our truth, from expressing our essence without fear or hesitation. It is a power that does not diminish others, but inspires them to find their own inner power. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with manifestation. In ordinary consciousness, we are constantly trying to manipulate reality to get what we want. But on the spiritual path, we discover a more organic form of manifestation, one that arises naturally from alignment with our true nature. When we are aligned with our essence, manifestation becomes a natural process of co-creation with the universe. We don't need to force or control, we just need to be open and receptive to the possibilities that naturally present themselves. One of the most subtle transformations that occurs on the path to awakening is the change in our relationship with intuitive knowing. In ordinary consciousness, we rely mainly on rational and analytical knowledge. But as we awaken, we develop a more direct form of knowing, one that comes from the heart, from deep intuition. This intuitive knowledge does not contradict rational knowledge, it complements and transcends it. It is a more comprehensive form of understanding that integrates all dimensions of our experience, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with silence. In ordinary consciousness, silence is seen as an absence of sound, of thought, of activity. But on the spiritual path, we discover that silence is full, alive, pulsating. It is in silence that we find our true nature. This silence is not just external, it is an inner silence that permeates all of our experiences. It is the space where our true nature can reveal itself, where we can hear the subtle voice of our soul. One of the most profound transformations that occurs on the path of awakening is the change in our relationship with love. In ordinary consciousness, love is often confused with attachment, need, or desire. But on the spiritual path, we discover that love is our very nature, not something we do or feel, but something we are. This unconditional love does not depend on external circumstances or reciprocity. It is a love that flows naturally from our being, embracing all existence without discrimination. It is a love that knows no borders or limitations. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with the truth. In ordinary consciousness, truth is seen as something fixed and absolute. But on the spiritual path, we discover that truth is living, dynamic, always revealing itself in new ways. This understanding of the truth leads us to deep humility. We realize that no matter how much we understand, there is always more to discover, more depths to explore. Truth becomes a constant invitation to deepen our understanding, to expand our consciousness. One of the most subtle transformations that occurs on the path of awakening is the change in our relationship with simplicity. In ordinary consciousness, we constantly seek more experiences, more knowledge, more achievements. But on the spiritual path, we discover the beauty of simplicity. This simplicity is not poverty or limitation. It is the natural expression of a consciousness that does not need external adornments to feel complete. It's the simplicity that comes from recognizing that we are already everything we need to be. Spiritual awakening also transforms our relationship with service. In ordinary consciousness, serving is seen as a sacrifice or an obligation. But on the spiritual path, we discover that service is a natural expression of our true nature. When we recognize our essential oneness with all life, serving becomes as natural as breathing. It is not something we do out of duty or to gain merit. It is simply the natural expression of who we really are. One of the most profound transformations that occurs on the path to awakening is the change in our relationship with gratitude. In ordinary consciousness, gratitude depends on circumstances. We are grateful when things go well, when we receive what we want. But on the spiritual path, we discover a gratitude that is independent of circumstances. This deep gratitude arises from the recognition that every moment is a gift, every experience an opportunity to grow and awaken. It is a gratitude that embraces both moments of joy and challenges, recognizing that everything serves our awakening. Ultimately, the path of spiritual awakening is a journey of returning to our true nature. It is not a search for something new or external, but a process of remembering, of recognizing what we have always been. It is the awakening to the truth that we were never truly separated from Source, never truly lost, only temporarily forgetful of our true nature. This awakening is not the end of the journey, it is actually a new beginning. It is the beginning of a life lived in full consciousness, in alignment with our true nature. It is an invitation to live not just for ourselves, but as channels through which divine consciousness can express and expand. The wake-up call is always there, whispering in our hearts. It is not a calling that we can ignore indefinitely, for it is life itself seeking to express itself through us in its fullness. When we finally respond to this call, we discover that our entire lives have been preparation for this moment. Awakening is the greatest possible adventure for a human being, the adventure of discovering who we really are and why we are here. It is a journey that demands everything of us, but in return offers us the only thing that truly matters, the realization of our true nature and the freedom that comes with that realization. The truth is that each of us is a unique and precious aspect of universal consciousness, like a single wave in the infinite ocean of being. Our journey is to awaken to this truth and live it fully, allowing our unique light to shine in the world, contributing to the awakening of all humanity. At this moment, more than ever, the world needs awakened beings who have the courage to face their shadows, to transcend their fears, to live their truth. The awakening of each individual contributes to the collective awakening of human consciousness, raising the level of consciousness of the entire planet. The invitation is made. The call resonates in your heart. The question now is, are you ready to respond? Are you willing to embark on this journey of profound transformation? Are you ready to discover who you really are? Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Life itself conspires in your favor when you decide to awaken. The entire universe mobilizes to support those who choose the path of truth, love, and conscience. The time is now. The place is here. And you are already everything you need to be to begin this journey. Trust the calling of your heart. Trust the wisdom that already exists within you. Trust the awakening process. For in the end, we discover that awakening is not something we achieve, it is something we allow. It is the recognition of what we have always been, the realization of what we never stopped being. It is a return home, a return to our true nature, a return to the love that is the essence of all that exists.